Hello, and welcome to Take a Look. I'm Lydia Hilton, and today I'm here with Candace O'Donnell, who's going to be playing Sarah Bernhardt at the Ware Center, April 28th and 29th. So Candace, can you tell us a little bit about Sarah Bernhardt and who she was as a person?
Well, Sarah Bernhardt is widely hailed as the world's greatest actress. Her dates really are 1848 to 1923, but we really don't know her dates because she was an unreliable narrator and she lied about her age.
Yeah.
And that skews all the research you do on her because all the dates are slightly off. We had a horrible time trying to figure out, my husband and I had done 3 years of research on her, but one of our sticking points was she did appear at the Fulton Opera House.
Yeah.
But we had a terrible time pinning down the date because of all of her dates being skewed. We think it was in 1911. And she was a diva. She was a brilliant actress, and one of my big challenges in doing this show is to make sure that I don't let her very libertine lifestyle overshadow the fact that she was a hardworking, brilliant, brilliant actress. She performed for 61 years. She performed the last 8 years of her life on one leg after an amputation. And she really thoroughly investigated every role, the history of the period. I have a line in the play, I invented method acting. Stanislavski, people think of that, but she invented method acting, really. She was an absolute genius of acting. She also had a wild, immoral lifestyle. She was amoral, not immoral, amoral. Her mother was a courtesan, and she says many, many times, I'm not at all ashamed of my mother's noble profession.
Yeah.
And she had many famous, famous lovers. And I do touch upon that, but I wanted to make sure that that didn't run away with the show.
Yes.
And that people would forget what a brilliant actress she was. Some of her famous lovers were the painter Georges Clarin, who did her famous portrait that we start the show with, the Prince of Wales, Prince Napoleon, Clemenceau, very famous actors. She says, I invented the casting couch, and she did. She says, when I was young, my leading men became my lovers. But as I mature, the pattern reverses, and my lovers become my leading men.
Oh, wow.
And she was a wild eccentric, and her public was fascinated by her eccentricities.
Yeah,
so she sort of invented the idea of the PR agent. She didn't need one because she would do these crazy, sort of like Lady Gaga. She would do these crazy, insane things. She would sleep in her coffin, and then she'd invite everybody in to watch her sleeping in her coffin.
Wow.
She'd ascend in a balloon. When she was in Canada, she made 8 tours of the Americas. And when she was in Canada, she would frolic on the back of a dead whale off the coast of Canada and make sure that that was photographed.
Wow.
And ascend in a balloon and just loved the original diva, the original ham. Knew how to milk it, knew how to go over the top, and just draw her audience in. So I hope to bring all of that out.
Yeah, and so obviously, I mean, there's so much about her life that's fascinating in every aspect, it seems, both her acting and personal life.
Yes.
So what was it that specifically drew you to her character and, like, getting into the research?
Well, we have to go back a few years for that. I have done several shows at the Fulton. I've done 8 shows there. And I was on the board of the Fulton. I think this was about 15 years ago, and we were having an anniversary. I think it was the 250th anniversary. So one of the things that Barry Kornhauser and I worked on was I wrote 6 skits about famous people who had appeared at the Fulton.
Okay.
I'll start with the men. Wild Bill Hickok, Tom Thumb, Mark Twain. Then the women were Anna Pavlova, the ballerina, Carrie Nation, the temperance lady, and Sarah Bernhardt. I wrote these. I played Sarah Bernhardt myself at that point. And it was just a short skit. It was mainly directed to children, so of course I had to censor quite a bit of it. And then we had a lot of fun with that. We closed down Prince Street and had this huge celebration with all these characters. Then I started doing her for groups around town and expanded it a little bit. And a couple of years ago, I did Mary Lincoln at the Ware Center.
Yes.
And then they commissioned me to expand my Sarah Bernhardt. So that's how I originally got interested in her. Many people came to see Mary Lincoln, and they were very complimentary. And they tell me they're coming to see Sarah, and I hope they do. But I warn them, this is an entirely different vibe. Mary Lincoln was a tragic figure, a victim. And my big challenge in doing Mary Lincoln was to get any comic relief into it at all. This is going to be pretty zany, slapstick, wacky, camp.
Yeah.
Sarah Bernhardt, it's going to be more of a comedy. There are a few poignant moments.
Okay, yeah.
But mainly this one is a comedy.
Yeah.
And in this one I have 3 different opportunities where the audience can join the action.
Oh, that'll be fun.
They can stand in their place and play along with me. And I think they'll enjoy that. And my husband's going to be introducing me. My husband, Dr. John O'Donnell, who's retired Millersville prof. And he's going to warn the audience that, don't need to worry. We're not going to, it's not Royal Caribbean, we're not going to bring you to the stage.
Yeah,
you can just stand in your place and have fun with it. So
yeah, that'll be a really unique experience.
I hope they enjoy it. I hope they have fun. If nothing else, I hope they have fun.
Yeah, exactly. And so is the show going to focus more on her personal life or her acting career? A bit of both.
I actually calibrated this, Lydia, to make sure that I didn't let the love life run away with the show.
Yeah,
so I think it's about 1/3 on her personality, her personal life, and about 2/3 on, I do quite a bit on her acting technique.
Okay.
And she was trained at the famed Conservatoire Française in the classical operatic style of French acting. And for example, every student in that school was taught a specific gesture for each emotion, like anger, fear, sorrow, love. And they each were, every single person acting in that company, when they were to depict that emotion, they were to use that gesture, which of course got very stilted. And she developed her own techniques. She wrote a textbook, The Art of the Theater, and she was constantly improvising. For example, when she came to the United States, she said that really trained her to be a better actress in her entire company.
Yeah.
Because of course the people couldn't understand the language. She was performing right here at the Fulton and all over the world in French. So then she had to develop techniques that every facial expression would, as we say in the theater, read. Every gesture. So she was constantly innovating. She was constantly experimenting. She played men. She was the first woman to play both Ophelia and Hamlet.
Oh, wow.
And she was a genius.
Yeah.
She was a genius. There's no question about it.
And yeah, so you seem very, well versed in, her life and everything. So how did you go about the research?
Oh, I'm glad you asked me that question because I was telling you before we started filming that I'm a dinosaur in technology. So I always do my research, plug, at the Lancaster Public Library. I do it with books. I don't know if you've heard of books, B-O-O-K-S. I don't do it on Google. And Philip there at the library was very helpful. He did this for me for Mary Lincoln too. That Lancaster Library has such a devoted staff, and they actually got books for me on interlibrary loan.
Oh, yes.
I had some books that they got for me that were over 100 years old for both Mary Lincoln and this. I mean, I was almost terrified to open the book.
Yeah.
I was afraid the pages were going to crumble on me. So that's why I did a lot of my research. And then I reviewed all my college French.
Yeah.
And I'm 74 years old, so you can imagine how long ago my college French was. And I had friends helping me with the French. I speak in a French accent. I hope it's an accurate. It's I'm sort of using Marie Chevalier. But then sprinkled throughout the show, I have several French phrases. Ones that are most people know, like s'il vous plaît. And if it's a phrase that I think they don't know, I quickly translate it.
Yes,
so
exactly.
Yeah, it was quite a job of research.
Yeah, and then I'm sure, celebrities aren't cataloged, the same way back then as they are today, especially in their personality aspect. So how did you, research her personality to kind of then convey it on the stage?
Well, it was helpful that she wrote her memoir.
Oh, okay.
So I had a primary source to go to.
Yeah.
As I told you earlier, she was not a reliable narrator.
Yeah.
But then she was constantly being reviewed, and people were constantly writing memoirs about her. One of her young cougars, when she was a cougar, when she was 69, one of her leading men was 27.
Oh, wow.
A man named Lou Tellegen. And he went on to be a film star in Hollywood. And years after her death, he wrote his memoir called Women Have Been Kind. And he just adored her. It was several years after her death.
Yeah.
And he just sang her praises, the superhuman kindness of that divine woman. We were on tour. She said, I want you to come into my car and travel in comfort. Well, that I could not refuse. And it goes on. So we had a lot of people writing about her.
Wow. And so, you know, obviously using, you know, a play is very different kind of to maintain this history of her life. What role do you kind of think that the arts can play in preserving history?
Oh.
Yeah.
I think the arts are essential to preserving history because they bring it to life. And she was a great student of history herself. As I said, when she would be doing a great Greek drama, she would be totally researching that period. Every period that she had, she would research. And one of my favorite quotes, I used it in all of my teaching, was, it's a quote from Catherine Ann Porter. And the quote is, "The arts are what will be left after the rubble has been cleared away."
Oh, that's good.
And I absolutely, absolutely believe that.
Yeah, wow. And so how did you get into acting yourself?
Well,
Choosing these
I guess I've been an incorrigible ham since I was a little girl. I taught English at Elizabethtown College, as I told you earlier, but my sons were cast in Peter Pan at the Fulton. I was still teaching. I had done theater over the years and a lot of choir work, but I drove them down to the rehearsals. I lived in Hempfield at the time. I drove them down to the Fulton, and I thought, well, as long as I'm going to be driving back and forth, I might as well audition myself because I had done shows in college and so forth. So I started doing shows at the Fulton, all this while teaching, you know. I did shows at the Fulton. I did EPAC. I did Sight and Sound. I did Rainbow, Dutch Apple, Theater of the Seventh Sister, all the time trying to juggle it. Then when I retired, I think I retired about 15 years ago. Then I did more and got into some meteor roles. I got to do Driving Miss Daisy, which was my favorite.
Oh, yeah, that would have been good.
And then started doing woman shows.
Oh, wow. Yeah, no, that's very interesting.
So I'm very, very blessed. I absolutely consider it a blessing. I get to combine my love of acting, my writing. I wrote the script. I write these scripts, and research.
Yeah. No, it's the best of all worlds.
Yeah, I was very blessed.
Yeah. And so what did you learn from, you know, researching and playing Sarah Bernhardt, and what do you think that we can kind of learn from her life?
She was a survivor. I start out with the Edith Piaf song, Rien, 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 je ne regrette not rien. She, no matter what happened to the woman, she would not capitulate. When she's 19 and she has her only child, and the Prince de Ligne deserts her, and her own mother says, no bastard will be born in my house. She takes that baby, she takes her neglected little sister, she takes her Jewish grandmother who's going blind, she leaves the apartment, finds her own apartment, establishes her own career. Nothing defeats this woman. She was married she was married only once in her life to a heroin addict. And she does not allow herself to be defeated by that. She goes to his drug dealer and tries to get him not to supply him, and eventually the man dies of heroin overdose, but she does not allow, she never capitulates. And of course the most incredible example is her leg. She injures her leg jumping off of a low parapet in Rio de Janeiro. The stagehand has forgotten to set the thick mattress. She slams down on a hard wooden floor. She shatters her kneecap and all of the bones in her right leg, and she endures unspeakable agony performing on this leg for 10 years. She gives 8 performances a week. Finally, gangrene sets in. There's festering. They have to amputate the leg. Then she says to the surgeon, I don't care what you take as long as you leave me my head. Then she performs for 8 more years on the one leg. She will not be defeated. She will not be defeated. And another sort of amusing thing about her is the age denial.
Yeah.
She's, in that way, she makes me think very much of Joan Rivers. She makes me think of the film Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. I'm doing this in a garish red wig, very garish, and I'm doing very garish, ghastly-looking makeup.
Yeah.
As I said, like Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, and then I'm deliberately pulling the white hair out so that people can see the white hair and know that this is an old lady who refuses to admit it. And that is comic, but I hope by the end of the play that people will see this is sort of sad. Because at the very end, she's sort of beseeching the audience, I still look young, don't I? I'm still eternally youthful. And so there's a little poignancy there, too.
Wow. Yeah, she's quite the remarkable woman.
She's quite the character. You can't make this stuff up. You come across these things, and they're just gems. And one of her letters to her favorite lover, who keeps begging her to marry him, and she refuses to marry him. And she says, I am just as unsatisfied the morning after as I am the night before. My frail body is exhausted by the act of love. Never is it the love I dream of. You must not be angry with me. I am an incomplete person.
Wow.
Now, people in the audience who've had Psychology 101 are going to see that this is pretty, it's not all funny. You know, it's sort of fascinating. I hope the audience thinks it's fascinating.
Yeah, and I'm sure it will be a fascinating performance. Thank you so much for...
Can I tell you one more thing, because I want to make sure that everybody knows. I have 2 cameo roles in this. One is my granddaughter, Finnegan Forrester, who is 9 years old going on teenage, and she's quite the ham. I say she's the only one I know who's a worse ham than I am. More of a loving acting. Yeah. She was in the Fulton production of Wizard of Oz, and she plays my little petite Regine, my little sister. Oh, and then I have a young man playing my leading man, just coming on doing sort of a slapstick, almost like a mime sequence where I showed the audience how I milk the ovations, so that I have all sorts of techniques as Sarah to keep them from applauding.
Yeah.
I have all these little tricks. I pretend to faint. They throw flowers at me. I'm so surprised that anybody would have flowers in the audience. Of course, I've planted the flowers in advance. And so that's really a fun part this time, that I have these two cameo roles. When I did Mary Lincoln, my little grandson did the voiceover for me. Tad Lincoln had a stutter. So my grandson did the stutter for me. So I have 8 grandchildren, and I say to myself, well, people probably think, well, Candy is just going to do anything she can to get her 8 grandchildren on stage. She'll just, and I'll say to them, guilty as charged. If there's any way I can get my grandkids on stage, I'll do it. So.
Well, thank you so much for coming in, and thank you for doing all this research and, having this performance.
Well, it's fun talking to you, Lydia.
Yeah,
thank you for seeing me. I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
And thank you for joining in and watching LCTV 66. I'm Lydia Hilton, and this was Take a Look.